Okay, welcome to the Chiller Chat edition of Words with Writers. And this is Kathy Beal, and I'm here with Jeffrey Eaton, author of the Murder Becomes series. And on the eve of the release of his fourth book, Murder Becomes Macau, and we had a little bit of we had an aborted mission a second ago, so now we are back. Welcome, everybody. We are in the right place now. Greetings, greetings. Thank you for being with us, Jeff.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. Looking forward to talking about the books and answering any questions you may have.
Well, I wanted to put your latest volume in context because you've been writing Murder Becomes books for a few years now. This is, in fact, the fourth. And could you introduce your detective, please, and what the basic storyline is that you've got going across all of the books?
You bet. So my protagonist, my detective in this murder book series is a guy by the name of Dalton Lee, born in Hong Kong. He was probably about 5 or 6 when his family moved to the United States, and he grew up in the San Diego area. He was determined to be pretty bright early on, so he got shipped off to Cambridge for college and to get his architecture degree. While he was there, he became fascinated by the details of the assassination of a California congresswoman. And the authorities couldn't figure out who did it, how it happened. But he was able to do that from his powers of observation as an architect and his smarts as a deducer of facts. And in so doing, took down an eerie cult out there called the Organization, who has as its goal taking down Western society as we know it. They subscribe to an offbeat science fiction novel that proposes the thesis that everyone ought to be free to do whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, without any sort of government oversight whatsoever. And so they want to instill this sort of way of life on everyone. And so in the first book, so he takes down that cult, but then with my first book, Murder Becomes Manhattan, we learn that the cult has regrouped and they have murdered a young, lovely socialite in New York. And they've left a calling card. That's how they know that it's the Organization, because it's a piece of paper from one of the original copies, editions of that science fiction book. That's how they let everybody know we're the real deal. This isn't a copycat murder. Mm-hmm. So he's brought in to solve that murder. From there, he is then brought to Miami for the second murder, that of college football's winningest football coach. And then in the third book, we moved to London and the Mayfair district of London, where a seemingly timid Savile Row tailor is found dead in the corner of a park in the Mayfair district. And then in the newest book, which is literally coming out, the digital version actually is already out there, but the hardback goes on sale on Tuesday in Macau, Hong Kong. It's the female CEO of a major casino consortium. And she is found dead, collapses on the casino floor from a poisoning. And he and his team are brought in to explore who committed that murder. And so that sort of brings you up through the fourth book, the current one that's coming out in next week.
So I want to talk a little bit about the process of creating a series, because it seems to me when you wrote the first one, the choice of title indicated that you already had in mind that more than one book was going to come out of this. Am I reading something into this?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And the reason for it was I really knew I wanted to do fiction writing. I'm a corporate communicator by profession. I have a corporate communication business. I write for corporate clients, and then I train corporate PR teams how to write. And I wanted to write fiction on the side. And so just for the heck of it, I went to a bookstore. And I also knew the mystery genre was one that appealed to me. I grew up first with the Hardy Boys, crazy about the Hardy Boys between the ages of about 7 and 12, 11, somewhere in there, and then quickly graduated to Agatha Christie. So the mystery genre was one I've loved forever. And I went to a bookstore one day, and I was looking, and I kind of stumbled upon the Sue Grafton series. And I thought, gosh, I don't remember all the titles, but like V is for Vendetta, D is for Dumbass. I don't really remember the names of the books. But I thought, what a cool gig. You got to have a gimmick, right? And so what I came up with was the idea of placing the books in different cities, all of which begin with the letter M for the alliteration, but also because there are a hell of a lot of great cities out there that begin with the letter M.
And you've done a lot of traveling with your corporate career.
Exactly. And he is, the books, also, he's an architect. I had to come up with, so who would be doing this traveling all over the world? It had to make sense. And the thought of him being an architect fit perfectly. Whether it's his own commissions or he's brought in to do lectures or whatever, this can be a great ruse for him to be in a particular city. So the two sort of meshed. And like I say, the cities all have terrific architecture. And in fact, in a certain way, focus on the architecture. So yeah, I did have an idea for a series to begin with. And the whole idea that each book would be set in a different city beginning with the letter M.
Right. So, well, let's go back just a second here. The organization, you pulled this out of thin air, right? There wasn't anything at all in the world that possibly inspired you to come up with this organization.
Nothing at all. It's completely fabricated. There's not anything even remotely like that going on anywhere. Not at all.
And in fact, in Murder Becomes Macau, the organization ends up being identified by a single initial.
Correct. It's a Q, but without the serif, so it's an O.
It's an O. Yeah, I did note that. So going back to like the arc, I know that from book to book, when you're done with the book, you often have a little teaser about what locale might be next. But clearly you have a short list. Am I guessing? You have a short list of places that you want to focus on?
Yes and no. I say it's more like a mid list. And it's a good thing because guess where one of my favorite places was? Marrakesh. And with an earthquake, of course, that happened there a week or two ago, that's now off the list, unfortunately, because so much of the architecture that would have made that the book to write about is gone, unfortunately. So it's a shifting list. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to spoil where the fifth book is, although I believe that really wasn't at the top of my list when I started the list. It was a consideration, and it kind of tweaks the model because the thing is not really a place. It's not a city, but it's so identified with the city that obviously everyone will instantly know where we're headed. And I mean, my heavens, I can just go through Madrid and Milan and Moscow and Montreal and Mexico City and Melbourne if you want to, and Manila and
we
Mumbai.
do have someone watching us from Australia, by the way.
Oh, good, excellent.
So Melbourne wouldn't be out of the way.
Well, and just we have a character in the books that's from Australia as well, Hunky Liam, who is nowhere near as dumb as he comes off at first. So there's lots of possibility there. Mecca. I mean, they just go on and on. So I'll never write all those books, that's for sure. I'll keep the readers guessing.
When you are you thinking ahead, or do you look at each book as this is where I am right now? Like,
pretty much the latter. I'm very linear myself, so what I have found happen, and it's already happening again with the next book, is I do start to play with the next book in my head pretty much as we're getting ready to sell the latest one. It's starting to percolate, but I don't let that go too far down the road because I'm linear and I need to focus on helping the current book be interesting to people. And talk about it. And then secondly, so often one of the joys of writing these books has been thinking I was going to do this, and then once I'm into it, it veers off into a different direction than what I originally thought. So by allowing myself that freedom of, you know, uh, considering what might happen in the book, but not getting too rigid about it, I kind of like that.
So you don't have beats or goals, or this is what the organization is mutating into now, and here's what they're going to do next, and you let it evolve.
No, what I might do is I might go, okay, the mood of the last book or two was this. I want to shift the mood. I want it to be a lot more lighthearted, or I want it to be darker. I do think about, say, victims and murderers, and having a balance to some degree when it comes to, say, age and gender and ethnicity and all that sort of thing. I will give some thought to that before I start writing, probably. But that's about as far as I go.
So there are some touchstones throughout the book, or all of the books.
Yes.
Although sometimes a different organization, different team member will arrive with skills that perhaps weren't there before. But
correct.
How did you, I mean, at the outset, you had like a profile for Dalton Lee that you came up with, certain specific physical objects that you've associated with him. For example, he has a certain type of, it's not a Vespa, but it's some kind of fancy little scooter thing.
Yeah, Michaeletta, which was sort of a Vespa competitor back in the 50s. And so, yes, there's that. There is, of course, his iconic obsession with grilled cheese sandwiches, which he's incredibly persnickety about, and usually disappointed in what he gets wherever he goes. In Macau, in the new book, he takes on a whole new kind of thing, in that he shows up at every appointment wearing a different type of hat, and everyone around him is like, what is this about? Why is he, one time it's a fedora, and the next time it's a beekeeper's hat or something, and they do get increasingly outlandish as the book goes on. Well, there's actually a reason for it, and I won't share that, of course, with the viewers yet, but listeners. But so yeah, and it's given him so much personality, I think. I'm really gobsmacked at the way people have taken to Dalton, the main detective. But I'm thrilled, because that's really what I wanted to achieve. I wasn't sure that would be the case. I thought it might be some of the people, somebody on his team, who might capture the fancy of the readers. But Dalton has by far, I get messages from people all the time going, oh, I saw this while I was in New York, and it made me think of Dalton. And to be a grilled cheese. I mean, I've had people send me, photos of grilled cheese sandwiches they're having, and saying, I wonder if Dalton would approve, or pictures of a scooter like the one he rides. So yeah, things like that.
There's also one theme, seems to me, quirky minor characters that come in. For example, there was a mime in Mayfair, and in Macau you have a snake charmer. Where did you dream that up, or is that just a state secret there?
I wanted in Macau, Dalton has a friend, a colleague, who's recommended to him by a friend of Dalton's back in the States, and said, hey, you might want to hook up with this guy, because he's done a lot of security detail all over Asia. And his name's Julian. And I wanted a scene where Julian takes Dalton to a club, and so they can kind of talk about the case a little bit. But you don't just go to a club and talk about the case, right? There has to be some entertainment of some sort. And so the snake charmer thing came to mind, because I just suddenly got this vision of Dalton sitting there in his chair with the snakes going up the legs of the chair and wrapping themselves around Dalton. And I thought that's it. That's what it needs to be. And there is another little hidden element there that I think if you've read the digital version, you're aware of, that ends up being a very important clue for who the murderer is. And that comes out of that visit. But I like, it's not the only scene of Dalton in a nightclub. He in Mayfair, he goes to watch CJ, the local police superintendent with Scotland Yard that he's working with, play the saxophone, because that's her side gig is she's a saxophonist, and he goes to watch her do that. And there's another scene in another book where he meets a woman who's helping them, and he meets her at a nightclub. And anyway, it's kind of fun. And but yeah, Snake Charmer just kind of came out of nowhere.
Got my attention. And the grilled cheese seems to be less on the radar in Macau. So I think I jumped ahead. How did you choose Macau? Was it a place you loved when you visited and you wanted to do this?
Well, I love more Hong Kong. After Paris, Hong Kong is my second favorite city in the world. I haven't been in quite a while, and the plan was always to go. But I started on this book literally 6 months before the pandemic. But before the pandemic, of course, you have to remember there was all the rebellion underway in Hong Kong as it began to lose its democratic freedoms. And so first was the riots in the streets and the crackdown. Then when we said, okay, maybe now we can do it, then comes the pandemic, and that shut it down totally for 2 to 3 years. So where I really wanted to go back and go to Hong Kong in particular, and Macau. Macau is interesting, but Hong Kong was the real draw for me. And a lot of Hong Kong is in the book as well. That's why I chose the metro area, if you will, the region. Macau is maybe 20 miles from Hong Kong. Nearby island. So they're kind of a unit in my mind, not to people there, but to me it's sort of a unit. And I was interested in going back to that unit and re-experiencing it.
And you get to take Dalton back to his roots by doing this.
Right, that as well. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, he gets to go back to the very neighborhood he grew up in and visit it and see different architectural wonders there and how they've changed since he was a boy. So that was another pull for doing that region. And I'll be honest with you, we're interested obviously in getting readers over in China and Singapore and Hong Kong and that area as well. So I thought that would be another reason to do it.
So how has your treatment of this character and this particular ongoing threat evolved over these books?
That's a really interesting question. I have to think about that just for a moment. I think in one way it has evolved in that as they have become more and more of a whack-a-mole in the last few years, if you will, the angrier Dalton has become about them, and the more resolve he has to quash them. And again, there is this whole secret reason why he and his team members in the firm are all like deeply emotionally engaged in this thing. I don't want to particularly give that away for those who maybe have not read the first book, because it kind of becomes a surprise, or you kind of learn about it over a few chapters. Why these people? Why this team? Why do they care? And so he still has a vested interest is the most important reason. But as he keeps solving the murder and stopping the terrorist plot from happening, but then they spring up elsewhere, he becomes more upset and jaded and has this resolve to end it for good. So it wasn't quite like that in the beginning, because Manhattan was the first time in 20 years they'd heard about the group being around still. So there's that. I think also, if there's another way it's evolved, he's increasingly, when the books start, he's probably about 34, 35. And now I have him about 40, 41-ish. And he's starting to be a lot more aware of and concerned about his own personal life and relationships, and being a good boss, being a good person, being a good friend. And then, am I going to end up with anybody? Because I'm now 41, and there've been dalliances, if you will, and there's been romances, but nothing has really stuck. And so that's there's a little bit of that maybe in the first book, but it becomes increasingly a part of his psyche as the books evolve. So I would say maybe those are the two most significant things.
And I am curious because I know from decades of knowing you that puzzles are a very big part of your existence. So do you approach this like creating a puzzle? Well, how has your crossword puzzle fixation informed constructing murder mysteries?
Right. Well, what's interesting is, I thought about doing that with the books, and then decided that was a little too predictable. And so I went with acrostics instead. So that's another characteristic of Dalton, is that he's an acrostics fan. He likes to work acrostics, which I've also become. I'm big on the New York Times acrostic in the New York Times Magazine when it shows up. And I've created a few myself. And I think acrostics are much more 3D. And Dalton is 3D. I'm not. So how I gave birth to this person, I'm not quite sure. But I think that I don't think in the construction of it there's a lot of similarity, because I do, being linear, I pretty much map out a book, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, all the way through to the end. And it changes as I'm writing the book. It has to, for certain reasons. But a crossword puzzle is more, this word works over here, this works down here. It's not, my construction of a crossword puzzle or an acrostic is not linear. So there is that big difference. The acrostics play an interesting role this time, in that they're sort of, his acrostic that he's working is sort of takes the role of a Greek chorus, in that the answer in front of him that he figures out is something going on in the room at the time, or what he's thinking based on someone's really stupid comment that they just uttered, or something like that. I kind of changed the role of the acrostic in this book in particular. So anyone who is a fan of word puzzles will appreciate it, I think, and enjoy it, and get a laugh out of it, I hope.
And do you, when you start, do you know who the murderer is?
Yes, that
Okay.
I do know. That's at the core of the book.
Okay.
Because I can't write anything else in the book without being very solid on who is the victim, who is the murderer, why did the murderer kill the victim? Because in all cases, it's not necessarily anything personal. It is that victim somehow got in the way of, thwarted, was a threat to the organization rolling out its plan. So I have to figure out what did that victim do to piss off the organization? And then how does the murderer, who is somewhere embedded in the victim's life, but might be someone really close to them, might be someone more on the periphery, how did they commit the murder? I have to have all that very solid in chapter 1, because I've got to start planting clues pretty quickly. And I also have to start planting dodges and red herrings pretty quickly. Right. And so all that's got to be pretty solid. Yeah.
Now I had mentioned a second ago, while we were waiting for technology to let you back in, there is a difference between the electronic versions of the book and the print version of the book.
Right.
You have made use of the capabilities of an ebook.
Yes.
It was deliberate from the start, right?
Deliberate from the start. For those who are listening in, if there's one thing about my books that makes them really stand out from all the other murder mystery books out there, it's this. And that is, if one gets a digital version of the book, whether it's for iBooks or Kindle or Nook or what have you, the story has embedded throughout it hyperlinks. And so when I make reference to the murder weapon, you click on whatever that murder weapon is, and you see a picture of it. One of the detectives is strolling through Lower Manhattan and hears a song that reminds her of her very, very best friend who's now missing. And she kind of has a meltdown on the sidewalk there in Lower Manhattan. And you click on the song and it takes you to a video of the song. It's a way that we have three-dimensionalized and augmented the story through photographs, videos, or audio clips, what have you, that I know of no other book series out there. And someone may know of one. I know of no other book series out there that's doing that. And I don't understand why they're not doing it, because to me, it takes the reading of a book, and particularly a mystery book, to an entirely different and new and exciting level. And so yet another part of my job as the author is when the book is done, I have to go back through and say, okay, what do I want to link people to? And then go find the assets for that. And we now take that stuff and put it all on our website, because we had a problem with broken links early on, where people would take things off of a page. We couldn't link. So now we take stuff, we find stuff that's open source and out there free on the market, and put it on our website. No more broken links, because we manage that. But it's a whole level of experiencing a book that I'm stunned. And what's funny is everyone I've asked says they love it. They love it as an addition. I've really said, hey, tell me, is it a distraction? Do you find it frustrating? Do you think it's silly, a gimmick? And everyone, including a book club in England that I spoke with about 6 months ago, they said, no, we love them. They're great. We get to see the buildings that Dalton is touring. We get to see the people sometimes that he's talking to. So I'm keeping it in, and I'm continuing to do it, and amazed that there aren't other books of this ilk, fiction books out there that are doing that.
Well,
you see the grilled cheese sandwich. You see
and you get a recipe for a grilled cheese sandwich.
The perfect grilled cheese sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a definition of the perfect grilled cheese sandwich?
Dalton's. It's the recipe that Dalton subscribes to. It uses that really thick bread that they use in Japan for toast, right? It's called shokupan bread. And it's the thick, there goes Miami. It is the thick, very thick white bread that they make toast from in Tokyo. And I love that bread when I was over there. And so I went, well, Dalton knows what he's talking about.
So he has his own separate existence now.
Yeah, he does. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Right. He text messages me every now and then.
I would not be surprised. And I would not be surprised.
You would not be surprised.
If that were to happen. Madeleine L'Engle, author of A Wrinkle in Time and many other books that graced our younger years, I once heard say that she was writing The Arm of the Starfish and became aware of a young man sitting in a chair in her room. It was a character introducing himself to her.
Oh my.
Josh, and then she wrote him into the book. I mean, no, there was not a person sitting there, okay, but she had a visitation by the character. It showed up and she went with it. So,
right.
I
had a reader who sent me a photograph. They were stopped at a stoplight, and next to them was I believe it was a pickup truck or some sort of sport utility vehicle, what have you. And on the back windshield, it said Dalton L. And they got a picture of it and sent it to me. And so they claimed they had a visitation.
I would not be surprised. Meanwhile, we have a whole bunch of cities in Australia that start with M that have been suggested to us.
Oh, really?
I will send them to you.
Please do.
Going through my notes, so you did mention that you're a corporate communicator and you have done this for a long time. In fact, we met, one of the two places we met was in a news reporting class in college, and the other being anthropology, which is kind of weird how this all fit together. So disclosure, everyone, Jeff and I have known each other for longer than either one of us is going to admit to. Don't twist our arms behind our back. And I personally think that your fiction writing actually shows the strength of your professional writing, because there is a clarity and a focus and a pointedness, not to mention grammatical precision, which is a big beef of mine that seems to be less and less common in writing these days. But you don't go about things any differently when you're writing fiction than you do when you're writing copy for someone's website?
I try to give myself a little more leeway to, we're so grounded, particularly if news writing is something that we were really involved in, that we're forced to be very, very concise about stuff, right? And I try to let that go, because fiction writing isn't like writing a press release in terms of the feel and the tone. It's okay to take 2 paragraphs to describe a room, you know? But at the same time, I don't want to be James Michener, right? Who's now laughed at for being so ridiculous in the 47 sentences it takes him to describe a sunset. I lean much more toward the concise journalism style of things. But what is the same is I do thoroughly research the books, meaning I get on Google Street. If I have a character walking down a street and I want to describe what's going on that street, I go on Google Street and I go to that exact street and go, step by step by step by step, what are the things that, at least when Google Street was there, that's what was there. So people who know the city would go, well, no, that would never be there, or that place blew up 5-10 years ago, right? So I'm big on factual accuracy, like a journalist, or like journalists used to be. And so that's the carryover, is really wanting the books to be solid, so that if someone from that city picks it up and reads it, they would go, yeah, this is pretty on target. I didn't see anything that was and there are times where I actually have had, I know in New York and in London in particular, I've had someone local who's gone through the book and helped me with, I tell them, you're not the person to talk to me about typos. You talk to me about, is it accurate for that city? And so that's helped.
And you do check the accuracy of certain minor plot details as well. I remember I did look at something about somebody talking to a reader online.
Psychic, yes.
Are you about whether it was believable about how it would happen?
Yes, right. In fact, we were just talking yesterday about one of my favorite names of a character is Delfina Delgado, for this psychic who kind of swindles one of Dalton's colleagues. And what I love about it is she's the one you would least expect to be swindled. She's the most level-headed of the whole group, and she kind of falls under the spell of a shyster online. But I love the name Delfina Delgado. I don't know how that came to me, but I like Delphi and Delfina being the female version of that. So yes, and I thank you for your help on that.
It was fun. Have you daydreamed about seeing any of your characters cast? Seeing any of your
my
books,
heavens, yes. We are doing it all of the time. I mean, all of the time, particularly, of course, Dalton. But here's the great story. There's several American Asian, Hong Kong Asian actors who kind of sort of might work. John Cho actually I think is pretty close, although he's actually now I think older. I think he's about 54, 55. He'd be too old to do it now. But here's the great story: is Bree, who is kind of an auburn hair, grew up in Arizona, tall, equestrian background, who's on the team. I have very, very strong connection to who that would be. And if anybody is familiar with the now canceled TV show Scandal, I loved the character. I actually can't remember the character's name now, but she was Red. She's the one who ended up being the spokesperson for the White House. And Darby Stanchfield is the name of the actress. So hands down, without a doubt, Darby Stanchfield would, in fact, I would write it when people say we want to do the book series, like, okay, I've got one stipulation: Darby Stanchfield has to play Bree, right? So another person who loves the books sent me a message after reading Manhattan and said, "Oh, by the way," she says, "do you ever watch Scandal?" And seriously, she goes, "Because boy, I'll tell you what, Bree sure reminded me a lot of what's her face." And I thought, oh my God, if that isn't the biggest compliment, I don't know what is. I telepathed the exact inspiration for that character to someone else who had no idea that that was what I was working with. So yeah, I do all the time.
There is no such thing
As
as
coincidence.
coincidence. No, not at all. Well, any other things you'd like people to know about the latest installment?
I'll suggest people go and check out the reviews that are coming in. I'm getting the most effusive reviews of the 4 books. They all have their own personality and character, have to, because they're in different cities. But this one is really resonating with people, I think, because there's a real big personal issue that emerges in this one that's a little different from what we've seen in the past books. A. B, this one is a little shorter than the others. The others weren't terribly long, but they were sort of in the 360 to 385, not 390. This is about 340. So I think it's an easier, faster read for people. They appreciate that. I think people kind of love the kind of casino, ambiance that takes not center stage maybe, but is there a lot. But then also, I think maybe it's because this locale is the most exotic of the 4. Most readers, North American readers, are going to be not particularly familiar with Hong Kong and Macau. And I tried to do what I could without making the book too long, bring in a lot of elements of the Chinese culture and the Portuguese culture, because Macau was a Portuguese colony. And so there's a blend and a mix of learning about the Portuguese culture and the Chinese culture and the Hong Kong culture. You find out about feng shui, the architectural technique that architects there are deeply committed to. It's like a religion, and it actually plays a role in the solving of part of the book anyway. So I think the fact that it's this sort of exotic place which lends itself to mystery and intrigue, China, is part of why people are really, really, really loving this book.
I just think it's very well structured and written, personally.
Thank you so much. So glad to hear it.
I gave it 5 stars. So, well, tell people where they can find it. It's coming out. Its publication date is the 26th of September.
The 26th of September. If you want, we're having a party online for the release, and we'll be giving away some books there and all of that. So that's one option, and you can find out about that at murderbecomes.com. Murderbecomes.com is sort of the ultimate clearinghouse for everybody. If you go there, you can see profiles about the different detectives. You can click on any of the books and it will instantly take you to all the buying options and the links to where you can go. The digital versions are right now available on Kindle, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, and Kobo for our friends in Canada, as well as Smashwords. And then the book, you can buy it from us. We're actually going to be a little cheaper for a while than Amazon will be. That's again at murderbecomes.com. You can just go click on the Murder Becomes Macau. It's the first thing you see when you get to the homepage. Click on Murder Becomes Macau. You go right to a page where you can choose the hardback version, buy it, and you're done.
Thank you so very much. I just had this image. I was just thinking about, okay, margaritas, Margaritaville, Murder Becomes Margaritaville.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any architecture there, but I can make it up, I suppose.
That would be where we would meet, I think. Anyway,
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad it's going so well. And I thank everybody who's been watching and soldiering through. And again, we have a list of cities in Australia that I'll be sending you. Thank you, Jen, for letting us know about those. And thanks very much.
Well, I appreciate your support, Kathy, and thank you so much. And congratulations on your successes with Empowerment Unlimited. Well deserved. And let's all keep reading great books, everybody.
I'm all for that. Oh, fascinating chat. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bye, all.